My sister-in-law keeps excluding me from family photos on the trip I paid for, but now she's broke because I left the bill for her luxury room unpaid. You won't believe this. I'm writing this whole story while I'm on vacation in Miami. Yeah, it's a shame. I'm 47 and I came here 2 days ago with my wife, Rachel, who is 42, her parents, who are 76 and 70, and her sister, Ella, who is 38. It was supposed to be a fun trip, but Ella has been making things miserable for me. She's simply ruining the trip, and I don't know how to deal with it. Rachel and I have been married for 10 years. We're both financially comfortable and travel a lot. We plan at least 3 good vacations a year, along with plenty of weekend getaways to relax. We both have demanding jobs with good salaries, we don't have children, and we enjoy living this way. For the past 2 years, we've made sure to take Rachel's parents on at least 1 trip a year. They're getting older, and her father is dealing with serious health problems, so her mother can't travel alone with him. For this summer, her father kindly asked if we could go to Miami. They had their honeymoon here, and for some reason, he fears this might be his last trip, God forbid. So we agreed. He even offered to cover some of the expenses because, as you know, a week-long vacation in Miami is expensive, but we refused. I'm earning good money, and they've always been very good to me. However, this year Rachel's sister Ella joined us too. She isn't doing well financially and has 3 school-aged children. Every year when we plan a trip and come back, she gets sad because she hasn't been able to afford a vacation since her honeymoon. This year, she directly asked if she could come with us. I agreed, knowing I would have to pay because obviously she couldn't afford a vacation in Miami. I didn't mind too much because sometimes you have to support your family. I made all the reservations for everyone, including the flights and hotels. But from the moment we landed, Ella started acting strangely. And by strangely, I mean she went out of her way to exclude me from everything. At first, I didn't think much of it. We arrived at a beach resort, and after settling in, Ella wanted to take a family photo. It seemed innocent enough, right? Wrong. Just as we were about to pose, she turned to me and said, "Oh, can you take the photo for us? We just want the 4 of us. Mom, Dad, Rachel, and me." I was confused, but I didn't make a scene. Maybe they just wanted a picture of the original family. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. Ella made it a recurring theme throughout the trip. Every time we stopped somewhere scenic or did something fun, she would say, "Oh, just the 4 of us," or "This one is only for the family." Guess who was always holding the camera? Me. Several times, Rachel defended me and said, "He's part of the family too." My in-laws also asked me to join them, but Ella never missed an opportunity to leave me out. The photos she uploaded to social media barely included me. It looked like the 4 of them had gone on vacation together. It was frustrating. I wasn't included in half of the trip photos, and instead of making memories, I found myself playing photographer or carrying everyone's bags. Later that afternoon, we decided to spend some time at the hotel pool. They had a beautiful infinity pool overlooking the ocean, and I thought it would be a relaxing break after all the walking we had done. Just as I was about to join everyone in the water, Ella turned to me and said, "Can you stay out for a moment? We want a girl's photo, just Rachel, Mom, and me." I thought that was fine. It wasn't a big deal. But after they took that picture, Ella made sure I was conveniently busy every time the camera came out. First, it was only the women. Then she wanted one with just the sisters. And of course, another one with the original family. If she disliked my company so much, why did she even come with us? Yesterday, we went sightseeing on a relaxing boat ride. It should have been a calm family day, but of course, Ella found another way to leave me out. Most activities at places like this are arranged with seating for 4 people, 2 and 2. Since there were 5 of us, Ella suggested that Rachel's parents sit together in one row while she sat with Rachel in the next. That would make it easier to take family pictures and make memories. That left me sitting alone. Ella turned to me and said, "Oh, you can take the next seat. That way it's more balanced." They even bought a souvenir photo from the ride, with me sitting by myself like a stranger. I understand that sometimes someone has to be left out of the frame, but why is it always me? Ella could switch places once in a while too, right? Another night, we went to an elegant seafood restaurant. It was one of those places where you're expected to make a reservation days in advance, but I had already taken care of everything and made sure we had a great table with a perfect view of the sunset. When we arrived, they took us to a round table for 6. Anyone who has been in this situation knows the best seats are the ones facing the view. Naturally, I assumed Rachel and I would sit together, with her parents across from us and Ella on one side. But just as we were about to sit down, Ella quickly slid into the seat beside Rachel, while her parents took the 2 seats facing the view. That left me on the side with no view, squeezed between Rachel's parents and the waiter's station. Rachel tried to protest, saying she wanted to sit with me, but Ella snapped at her and told her to stop being so clingy because this was a family trip. I bit my tongue. I thought, fine, it's only 1 meal. But halfway, whenever I tried to join the conversation about family stories, Ella kept changing the subject to things I had never been involved in. She talked about childhood memories, high school trips, and inside jokes that naturally didn't include me. Rachel and even her parents tried to include me by explaining the background behind those stories, but Ella kept interrupting, making everything feel forced. By dessert, I was practically a ghost at the table, ignored while everyone else laughed and reminisced. Today, we had booked a spa day. I reserved a private suite for Rachel and me, another for my in-laws, and a single room for Ella. However, my father-in-law wasn't feeling well and wanted to spend the day resting by the beach. I thought the four of us could still go and enjoy ourselves, but Ella pulled another one of her tricks. She said, "You should probably stay here and keep Dad company. It would be nice if just the women did the spa treatments together. I want to spend time with Mom and have a girls' day." I was furious, but I tried not to explode. I paid for all of this, and now I was being told it was a women-only activity. After that, I wasn't really in the mood to join them anyway, so I stayed behind and relaxed with my father-in-law. He gave me some advice. It was enjoyable and comforting. I wanted to tell him about my frustration with Ella, but I kept it to myself because I didn't want to ruin the mood. Now, with 3 days left, I honestly can't stand Ella anymore. However, I don't want to let my anger ruin the trip for my in-laws. How should I handle this situation? Edit 1. Yes, I expressed my concerns to Rachel the other night. She understands that I feel hurt, but she says it's possible Ella isn't doing it intentionally. Growing up, they almost never had family vacations because my father-in-law was mostly deployed with the military, so maybe Ella simply wants to make the most of the opportunity to spend time with her family. Sometimes I feel like maybe I'm overreacting or acting entitled. Do you think it's unreasonable for me to feel entitled to be included in everything just because I paid for the trip? Am I overthinking this? Update 1. Thanks to everyone who supported me. I know sometimes it might not seem right, but what she did wasn't okay. Spoiler, I got my revenge, but you'll have to keep reading to find out how. By the end of the trip, I had had enough. I was being treated like a stranger on a vacation I had paid for, and my blood boiled every time Ella pushed me aside. The final straw came the day before we were supposed to leave. I pulled Rachel aside and asked why she wasn't defending me. I told her I felt like a nobody, and Ella could clearly see how hurt I was. Rachel sighed and said, "I know, I see it, but confronting Ella will only make things worse. We don't want to ruin the trip for my parents, especially with Dad's condition. Can we just let it go for now?" I didn't want to create drama either, especially considering Rachel's father's health, so I let it go at that moment. But deep down, I was already planning my revenge. I wasn't going to let Ella get away with treating me like that on a trip I had financed. On the day we were leaving, I told Rachel to go to the airport with her parents and that I would go with Ella. Rachel looked at me and said, "I know what you're trying to do." I replied, "Of course you do. Now stay neutral, just like you have throughout the entire trip." She finally nodded. Then I went to the hotel reception desk to settle the bills. The hotel worked in such a way that although the rooms had been prepaid, all extra charges, such as meals, room service, and activities, had to be settled at checkout. I asked the manager to separate the bills for each suite, making up some excuse about taxes. He agreed. It wasn't a big deal for them. I proceeded to pay everything for my suite and my in-laws' suite, but for Ella's room, I asked the manager to give the bill directly to her. By then, Rachel and my in-laws had already left for the airport. They needed to arrive early to arrange wheelchairs and everything else. The manager called Ella and asked her to come down to reception to settle her bill. She came downstairs immediately, and when the manager handed her the bill, you should have seen the look on her face. She stared at me in confusion while I stood there with a serious expression. She became a little nervous and asked, "Aren't you going to cover mine?" I smiled and replied, "I already paid for my family. You can cover yours." She hadn't realized how much she had spent during the trip. Room service, spa treatments, the mini bar, and all the other extras she had been ordering had added up to a considerable bill. She handed over her credit card, only for it to be declined. Apparently, her card could barely cover half the amount. She was furious, desperately trying to figure out how she was going to pay. Every now and then, she gave me pleading looks, but I didn't feel sorry for her. She got unpleasant looks from the hotel staff and other guests, which was pretty satisfying. I simply sat on the couch and enjoyed the show. I was prepared to pay her bill if she came over and apologized for her behavior, but she was too proud to do that. Instead, she expected me to voluntarily offer to pay. She ended up calling her husband, who wasn't happy at all about having to bail her out. The bill was nearly a month of his salary, if not more. After an uncomfortable argument, she finally managed to get him to send her enough money to cover the bill, but she was furious. I wanted to leave her at the hotel to deal with the problem herself, but because the reservation was in my name, I couldn't. I was prepared to face the consequences and pay the bill if Ella truly couldn't cover it, but I had already gotten my revenge by embarrassing her. She finally managed to pay, and the hotel got us a taxi to the airport. She didn't speak to me afterward. To make matters worse for her, she hadn't checked in for her flight either. So when we arrived at the airport, we were already rushing and running late, and Ella still had to deal with getting her boarding pass. As if that wasn't enough, I managed to get Rachel, my in-laws, and myself upgraded to business class, leaving Ella in economy. I left her standing in line and went through priority boarding. By the time she finally boarded the flight, we were already seated. She walked past us without speaking to anyone. She was furious. The moment we landed, Ella went straight to her parents and told them everything, trying to paint me as the villain who had abandoned her at the hotel. She made such a scene that she stressed her father out. She started arguing right there at the airport, crying as she described how I had humiliated her in front of the hotel staff and guests, and how I hadn't upgraded her or checked her in for the flight. I calmly explained my side of the story. She had spent the entire trip excluding me and treating me like a stranger even though I had paid for everything. So why should I cover her expenses if she didn't consider me part of the family? Rachel's mother, trying to keep the peace, simply shook her head and said, "Ella, enough. We don't want to get involved. We saw how you pushed him aside the entire time. We asked him to join us, but you had your own plans to exclude him. Now deal with it." But Ella wasn't finished. She accused me of using money to control everyone and called me a horrible man. She looked at Rachel and said, "You teamed up with your husband to humiliate your sister, your own blood. You'll see what this man does to you. He'll cheat on you, and you won't be able to do anything because you're blinded by his money." That led to an ugly fight between Rachel and Ella. Rachel's father, who had remained mostly silent throughout the trip, simply said, "Ella, your brother-in-law has already done enough for you. If you can't appreciate it, then shut up." There was complete silence afterward, and he asked me to take him home as soon as possible. I helped him into the car, and then we left, leaving Ella at the airport. She was too proud to get into the car with us even though she hadn't arranged transportation. Maybe she took a taxi home, which would have cost her a lot because her house is around 100 to 120 kilometers from the airport. I dropped my in-laws off at their house, and they both thanked me for everything. Their gratitude was the only thing that mattered to me. My mother-in-law hugged me longer than usual, and that made my day. Afterward, Rachel and I returned home. We both stayed silent about what had happened, ignoring the elephant in the room. The next day, we went back to work, and life seemed to return to normal. But the other day, Rachel finally broke the silence and told me Ella was having problems with her husband because of the payment. He demanded that she repay every cent because he couldn't afford her excessive spending. Now she's broke after paying that and her credit card bills. Rachel supported me, but admitted that maybe I had taken things a little too far. Still, she acknowledged that Ella needed to learn a lesson. She had brought it on herself. So, Reddit, was I wrong for making her pay her own bills? Or did she deserve it after everything she put me through? Update 2. I received mixed reactions to my last post. Some people said I went too far and basically wanted me to be a pushover. Well, I'm not. I know my worth. I didn't expect Ella to treat me like her servant, but I did expect some respect. The bare minimum I wanted was to be included, right? As I mentioned, I was willing to pay if Ella came to me and made things right, but she wasn't willing to acknowledge her mistakes. Either way, I don't owe anyone an explanation for my actions. I did what I felt was right. Ella has never been close to me. Of course, we see each other at family gatherings, and she visits Rachel often, but beyond basic greetings, we barely have conversations. Still, I didn't mind paying for her trip. That deserves at least some respect. As I mentioned in my previous post, her husband wasn't thrilled about having to bail her out. I believe the bill was almost equal to his monthly income. Who would be happy spending an entire month's salary paying their wife's extravagant hotel bill? As expected, Ella painted me as the villain to her husband. Things became so bad that he refused to attend Thanksgiving dinner at my in-laws' house because I would be there. Every year, my mother-in-law hosts the dinner, and this year she wanted to make it special, especially because of my father-in-law's declining health. Ella's husband declined the invitation, and when my mother-in-law confronted him, he said he didn't want to share a table with someone as evil as me, someone who humiliates a person with fewer financial resources. My mother-in-law then told him the truth about Ella's behavior during the trip. She suggested that he look at the vacation photos to see how blatantly Ella had excluded me. There was barely a single group photo that included me. I actually have a decent relationship with her husband. We're neither very close nor distant. We see each other every year at Thanksgiving and sometimes during other holidays. I always thought he was a good guy, and I never looked down on him or anyone else. After Rachel told me everything, I hesitated about attending Thanksgiving dinner, but I still went for my father-in-law's sake. Ella and her husband didn't show up. While my father-in-law was around, my mother-in-law said they couldn't come because they were visiting his parents. I didn't realize until later that it was just a lie to keep my father-in-law from becoming stressed. After he went to bed, my mother-in-law told me the truth. Ella and her husband had been fighting non-stop, and Ella had become unreasonable. She constantly belittled him for his low income, and now expected him to take a second job in addition to his full-time job. He agreed, but only on the condition that he would no longer be responsible for housework or childcare. Ella didn't like that. I was surprised to learn that she only works 20 hours a week, but expects him to work more than 60 hours between 2 jobs while still doing his share of the household chores. My mother-in-law had been trying to advise Ella and make her understand the reality of her situation, but it seemed like Ella had gotten a taste of the luxury lifestyle and now wanted to maintain it. Eventually, my mother had to tell Ella that if she ended up divorced, she shouldn't expect her parents to step in and help her. When Rachel and I came home from dinner, we talked about how bringing Ella on the trip in the first place had probably been a mistake. I keep remembering a phrase I once read at one of the resorts. Once you experience the luxury of a private island, you'll never set foot on a public island again. The same thing applies to flying business class. I feel bad for her husband. The poor man is suffering. I hope Ella comes to her senses before it's too late. I wanted to share this update because I thought it might be useful to someone else dealing with similar family dynamics. It's frustrating when someone treats you like a stranger, especially when you're trying to be generous. Despite her behavior, I'm glad I attended Thanksgiving dinner for my father-in-law. It shows how much I care about the family despite all the tension. It's unfortunate that Ella is creating this division, but it seems like the truth about her behavior is finally coming out. I hope she takes some time to think and realizes the impact of her attitude before it damages her relationships even further. Update 3. Well, everything has finally blown up between Ella and her husband, and divorce seems inevitable. The situation between them has become unbearable, and he has reached his limit, especially because of the weight of Ella's debts and the constant stress they've added to his life. First of all, I feel bad for him. He isn't responsible for his wife's decisions or her attitude during the trip, but he's still the one paying part of the price in every sense. Ever since the conflict between them began, Ella has done nothing but continue blaming me for all her problems. It's easier for her to blame me and say that her debts and broken marriage are the result of my lack of support than to admit that things have reached this point because she has been unable to apologize, acknowledge her behavior, or face the consequences of her actions. Even though she had multiple opportunities to make things right and apologize, she continues to cling to her version of events. I'm not going to accept responsibility for her marriage falling apart. I've spoken with her parents, and they don't support her in this either. In fact, they're frustrated with Ella and say she has done more than enough to bring things to this point. In their own words, Ella has bought every ticket necessary to ruin her marriage. They know the situation is complicated, but even they can't take her side in this story. They're worried about the impact all of this will have on the children and the family dynamic, but they believe Ella needs to face the consequences of her decisions. I also spoke with her husband, who, to my relief, doesn't blame me for the situation. He told me that although the debt issue was the final trigger, they had already been having problems in their marriage, especially because of Ella's lack of commitment to working and contributing to the household. Eventually, they reached a breaking point. That's why they're now living separately, as Ella has moved out of the house, but don't think her husband kicked her out. Ella left by her own choice. Her husband gave her two options. Either Ella stayed in the house with the children and took care of everything while he moved out, or he stayed and took care of the house and the children, but Ella would have to leave. To everyone's surprise, Ella chose the second option. She preferred leaving the house rather than putting in the effort to stay with her children and take care of the home. This gave me a completely new perspective on her husband. He's someone who genuinely isn't afraid of hard work. During one of our conversations, I started considering offering him a job opportunity at my company. People with his work ethic and commitment are always valuable to a team, and I think I could find him a position with good pay and better benefits. In a way, I feel like I owe it to him because even though he bears no responsibility for what his wife did, he is also a victim of the situation and is struggling to move forward. So, in short, that's what has been happening lately. It has been an exhausting process for everyone, but I feel like things are finally starting to move in the right direction, although at a high cost for some people. Maybe I'll update again in a few months if things develop further, if Ella and her husband finally divorce, or if something relevant happens in my life. Edit. Some people asked where Ella is living now. She's staying at one of her friends' houses. Her parents made it very clear that they didn't want her staying with them. Update 4. Several months have passed since my last update, and a lot has happened in my life and in my extended family during that time. Now that everything has calmed down a little, I want to tell you about the consequences of what happened and how things have developed. First, I have to begin with some sad news. My father-in-law passed away. In the end, he was right when he said the Miami trip might be his last big trip. It's devastating because I truly loved that man, and losing him has been incredibly difficult for all of us. Some people told me I should have confronted Ella's behavior earlier, that I should have put a stop to her disrespect from the beginning. However, I'm grateful that I didn't. Putting up with Ella during that trip meant my father-in-law was able to enjoy a vacation with his family. We even had our own moment together on the beach, and I still remember some of the things we talked about. He was always there for me and treated me like a son. He gave me advice, helped me when I was just starting my life with Rachel, and taught me more than I can put into words. I know my wife will miss him deeply, and my mother-in-law will too, but I feel like I've also lost someone who was a pillar in my life. He helped us when we were beginning our careers. He was a wise and generous man who never asked for anything in return for his help and love. I'm glad to know that I was able to contribute, even in a small way, to his happiness during his final days. Moving on to my sister-in-law and her divorce, the papers have now been signed, so Ella is officially divorced. I'm sure you're wondering what happened with her debts and my former brother-in-law. Well, during the divorce process, he gave her two fairly reasonable options considering their situation. Ella could choose shared custody of the children, but in that case, she would be completely responsible for her personal debts. Her credit card debt would remain hers, and she would also have to repay the money he used to cover the debt she accumulated in Miami, which would be deducted from the spousal support he owed her. The other option was for him to have primary custody of the children, meaning they would live with him during the week and only spend weekends with Ella, and he would take responsibility for the debt. Not surprisingly, Ella chose the second option. This arrangement benefits him because he won't have to pay child support since the children spend most of their time with him. Some people might think Ella gave up an important financial opportunity by not wanting primary custody, and maybe from that perspective it was a mistake for her. But deep down, I believe Ella simply doesn't have a genuine interest in her children. One sign of that is that she has already started dating other men, all of whom are apparently financially comfortable. According to the rumors we've heard, it seems like her intention was simply to free herself from her family responsibilities and find someone who could provide the luxurious lifestyle she wanted so badly. On a more positive note, since this update started on a sad note, my former brother-in-law is now officially my coworker. As I mentioned before, I was able to get him a position at my company, and I'm very happy for him. The pay is better, and the job also comes with benefits that are very useful to him, including on-site childcare for his youngest child. However, we wanted to be strategic about the timing. We made sure he started his new job at the right time, so that he wouldn't have to pay higher spousal support because of his new salary. Despite how difficult all of this has been for him, he says he can finally begin to see a light at the end of the tunnel. Life somehow moves forward. We've all been through difficult times, but I feel fortunate to be able to say that the situation overall has improved. In fact, we're beginning to plan our next trip. This time, it will be different, because my father-in-law won't be with us for obvious reasons, and that leaves a void that will be difficult to fill. However, we're planning to bring my mother-in-law, who needs a change of scenery and something to lift her spirits. I'm sure she'll also enjoy a family getaway that allows her to take her mind off things and move forward as much as she can. And don't worry, Rachel and I also have a trip planned just for the two of us. We simply wanted to do something nice for my mother-in-law. As you can imagine, there's someone who clearly won't be part of this trip. I think it's pretty obvious who I mean. Ella is the last person we would want to invite, and I think we all know that her presence is no longer welcome.